Well, James, we started talking about this last week, but just kind of briefly. Um, the big three payments companies, MasterCard, PayPal, and Visa, are in a race to the new frontier of digital commerce, agentic AI.
Yeah.
All three have now introduced initiatives where AI agents can complete purchases on behalf of consumers. Ryan McInerney, in a live stream they did earlier this week, said, quote, these technologies have the potential to radically transform commerce, to radically transform how we shop, how we all buy, and how commerce works at its most fundamental layers.
Hmm.
Visa's working with Anthropic, Microsoft, Mistral, OpenAI, Perplexity, and others to integrate payment capabilities into AI chatbots. When people use a chatbot to shop, they will also be able to use AI agents to pay for purchases.
Hmm. So I haven't really looked into this much. I mean, I've definitely heard the rumblings, but I haven't really seen it. Did he present any information on kind of how does it work? I mean, what's unique about it? How are they securing like to make sure that the AI isn't just buying things they're not supposed to buy? Or I would imagine that's been
Right,
right.
right, yeah, and all three have like intelligent commerce, um, and so forth. The tokenization is sort of at the root of it.
Okay.
It plays a major role in both Visa and the Mastercard initiatives.
Okay.
Okay, as we know, tokenization is a cryptographically protected token that's linked to the consumer's card.
Right.
Think of it as like giving AI agents its own credit card, but with strict parental controls.
Interesting. Yeah, I guess because that would be the thing, right? It's ultimately the controls is it's like getting an AI agent to be able to use a card is easy. Making sure the AI doesn't use the card when it's not supposed to is hard.
And that's the thing that I find a little bit disconcerting myself. I mean, I you know, it's convenient, but it can also redefine fraud,
Well,
right?
I would have, yeah, it could. I think the way I would kind of envision it, and again, I haven't looked at it, but the way I would envision it would be that OpenAI would first of all there'd be that authentication of the user, so it's like okay, I know that this, they know it's me using it, right? And then
Right.
and then they probably will have to have standardized responses or something where before the AI actually completes a purchase, it will say, are you sure you want to spend $87.31 on this? And there'll have to be some kind of probably standardized statement and response that then allows that token to be used. That's going to be something like that, I would think.
Yeah, exactly. And that's what some of the things that I've been reading about have been telling me is that there has to be a lot of trust built into the system and
Right,
also needs to be a lot of communication.
right.
Say AI chooses product X over product Y, right?
Yeah,
Consumers are going to want to know the basis of that decision. Why
yeah,
is why is X so much better than Y?
right, right. Hmm.
So um, and I also it to me the thing that really kind of troubles me is that the fraud potential, right? And especially quote unquote friendly fraud,
Sure. Oh, yeah, you could say, oh, my AI agent bought that. That wasn't me.
right?
Yeah,
Right?
yeah, they'll have to have that'll be a whole new thing of like chargeback handling and everything. Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it kind of reminds me. I remembered I had a friend a couple years ago. She let her son use her credit card to do online gaming, right?
Right, right,
Then suddenly she started getting all these charges on her card for online porn sites.
right,
He wasn't playing game. He was playing games, but not the same kind of game she thought he was playing.
right,
I mean,
right,
he was like a 20 something and
right. Huh.
yeah. So,
So,
so
Patty, you know what is so interesting to me about this is the more I'm thinking about this as we're talking is like I think there's this existential risk to our industry right now of decentralized payments. Like, one of the things you think about, I think we all in our industry have this concept of a merchant account as a merchant has a merchant account, which is how they accept payments.
Right.
And I don't know if that's going to be true as we move forward, meaning you look at a restaurant right now. Well, they also get payments from Grubhub and DoorDash and Uber
Mm-hmm.
Eats, right?
Mm-hmm.
Groupon or there's all these. You're going to have some crypto payments at some point, kind of starting to filter in a little bit more heavily. And so you have all of these other ways that people can pay. Buy now, pay later is going to be in there, and now you're also going to have AI, coming in to where in other words, if OpenAI, if ChatGPT is making a purchase on my behalf, then that purchase it is going to go. It's going to be very interesting to think about, OpenAI and these other big tech companies, if they're going to start to try to grab some of the acquiring piece, where you could have a lot of these situations where it's like, okay, the merchant has a merchant account. They do really, there's $100,000 a month in revenue coming from card payments, but
Right.
but the actual merchant account is only capturing half of that,
Right.
and the other half is coming from these other decentralized kind of payment sources. So that'll
Mm-hmm.
be an interesting risk to kind of think about in terms of um, how we accept payments. Now, I guess if we're thinking about an AI agent making a purchase, well, you would assume that that means that the AI agent is just using a card in a some kind of a normal checkout flow. So
Right.
that should still go through the core merchant account, I guess. But it'll be interesting to see how that plays out.
Yeah,
So.
I really think there's a lot of things up in the air about this.
Oh, for sure. And it'll evolve so much over the next few years, but this is definitely keep us in the loop on this. This is a very
Yeah,
interesting development.
this
So
is a very interesting development. I had a meeting the other day with some friends. Actually, it was with the Green Sheet people,
mhm.
and Kate Gillespie, who's the
Great.
president. She's like, I just don't like this idea. Like it just strikes me as like a whole new era of fraud, like a whole new
Mhm. Yeah.
dimension of fraud.
Yeah. Well, it's
And
it's
and
definitely
I think
coming.
I think
Nobody's gonna
yeah,
stop it at this point. So
yeah, exactly.
yeah. All right. What's our next one, Patty?
Our next one is on stable coins.
Okay.
So Visa says it wants to use stable coins to support cross-border payments.
Of course. That makes sense.
Makes a lot of sense. Stable coins is just we've explained it in the past, but I'll explain it again.
Yeah.
They're cryptocurrencies that are tied to fixed assets, fixed values, like fiat currency, which makes them a steadier store of value than, say, crypto coins like Bitcoin that are, right?
Right.
But one obvious use for stable coins is the remittance markets. Um, and that was brought up. Nacha had its annual convention last week, and there
Okay.
was a Visa executive there that was talking about that. He said that remittances are a major method of sending money. Well, as we know, they're a major, way of sending money to friends and family, back home, right? But they can be expensive.
And Patty, for our audience that's newer to payments, what is remittance?
A remittance is when you are sending, well, it can be a couple of different things, but in this context, it's sending money from point A to point B.
Right.
Usually from the US to a third world country.
Right. Right. That's usually the context is I need to send money to someone that traditionally would be hard to send money to. I guess
Right.
the way to put
Yeah,
it.
like a lot of it is like, you have these people that come to the US, they get a good job, they want to help the family back in India, they
Right.
make remittances
Yeah.
back to them.
Right.
I mean, so that's different from like remittances like in the corporate world.
Right. Well, that's what I was trying to clarify. And I think, again, the stable coins, we have the cryptocurrency technology making it, very inexpensive to exchange value over, it doesn't
Right.
matter if it's in another country or not. But, it takes the volatility out because it's going to be pegged to the US dollar. They're going to be using like US stable coin or something like that. So,
Right.
yeah.
Right. And that's really interesting. So, um, you know, uh, Visa CEO Ryan McInerney suggested in a call with analysts that the path to stablecoins isn't wide open yet.
Hmm.
He described a milestone in which Visa recently settled a cumulative $200 million stablecoin, transaction in stablecoin payments.
Hmm.
But he added, quote, a very small portion of our overall settlement value is represented by this.
Of course.
So I also wanted to just mention that in a related development, there was legislation in the Senate that was supposed to come up for a vote just yesterday. It would have, yesterday being Thursday, the 8th.
Yeah.
Okay. And it would have created a detailed framework for regulating stablecoins. It's
Hmm.
called the Genius Act, which stands for Guiding and Establishing National Innovation for U.S. Stablecoins. Don't you love the way they come up with these acronyms? Like,
Well, they probably use ChatGPT to come up with
yeah,
that.
yeah, yeah. But before ChatGTP, we
Still had
still
some good
had these
ones.
kind of
Yeah.
things, right? Like that they have like somebody on staff whose job it was
Right,
just
right,
to
to
come
come
up
up with
with
these
these things,
acronyms. Yeah.
with these acronyms.
Funny. Yeah.
So anyway, the legislation is stalled in the Senate. It would have created a detailed framework for regulating stablecoins,
Okay.
and it needed, to have one of those 60% votes to get on, the agenda, and that failed. Um,
Really.
yeah. And so, but here's another interesting thing. This all comes as the Office of the Comptroller of the Currency, which has, for folks who may not know, they regulate the big national banks and the like the B of A's and the Wells Fargos and so forth, as well as smaller
Right.
banks. Um, they have ruled that the banks it regulates can now buy and sell crypto assets like stablecoins on behalf of customers. It was in an interpretive letter that was released this week. It also stated that banks can outsource crypto asset services to third parties.
Wow.
That's
Interesting.
a big change.
Yeah. Okay.
Yeah.
Stable coins are going to be continuing to develop. Yeah. Wow. Very
Yeah.
cool.
Yeah, I think that's a really interesting, kind of switch around because, and again, I think it also has to do with the change in administrations. There's a different outlook on regulation, you
Well,
know.
right. Well, and also the Trump administration seems to be really bullish on crypto in general, right? Just, from
Yeah,
a lot of
and
things
and
that happened with that. So,
there's part of me that wonders if this stalled legislation has to do with that, with all of this, uh, crypto coin that the Trump family has been putting out, and the they just seem to be really bullish on crypto, and and there's a lot of on the other side of the aisle, there's a lot of apprehension about that.
yeah, sure. Yeah. That'd be really interesting to see how it all unfolds for sure. So,
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
okay,
So
what's our next one, Patty?
here's an interesting one. A major technical outage last week brought the P2P payment network Zelle to its knees. Actually, it
Really?
was over the weekend. I don't know if you heard about this,
About that. Mm-mm.
but it left millions of Americans unable to send or receive money through their bank accounts. In some cases, they even saw like duplicate debits to their bank accounts.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Some
Goodness.
of the largest financial institutions were caught up in this snarl, including B of A, Truist, Capital One, and Navy Federal Credit Union.
Oh, wow. And
Now,
this was the result of a cyber attack or just
it was an internal glitch at Fiserv.
at Fiserv, really?
At Fiserv, yeah, and that's what was really interesting
Oh,
because
wow.
you know um, it didn't only affect Zelle, but also Fiserv's big into the ACH arena,
Right.
so it had that was a problem as well.
Somebody had a
Uh,
really bad day at Fiserv.
yeah, right. Yeah, they said the stock kind of took a hit after that, as you can imagine.
Uh,
So
that's really interesting. I know Zelle is just used by so many people now. It's kind of I personally don't use Zelle, but
I don't either, but a
common.
lot of my friends do.
Right,
You
right.
know,
Yeah.
um, Zelle's appeal obviously lies in speed, convenience and lack of fees for most transactions.
Right.
Here's the growth, which I think is really interesting. It processed over $15 billion in transactions in 2018. In 2023, it handled 500 billion.
Wow. Starting
Today,
to starting to be real money.
yeah, yeah, right. Today, more than 1,800 financial institutions participate in the network.
Yeah.
Now, it's important to remember that Zelle's come under fire for its perceived lack of consumer protections.
Right.
Last year, the CFPB sued early warning services and three of its largest bank owners for failing to protect consumers from fraud. But
Mhm.
that case was dropped in March, one of many complaints that were rolled back by the Trump administration. Um, but, and here's another interesting thing that I thought was really interesting. In statements, you know, it's kind of a zinger, actually. I think it's like when all this started unfolding, when everybody was getting caught up, that was using Zelle. In a statement to users, Zelle told users to consider using other platforms like Venmo, Cash App, and Apple Pay.
Yeah.
That's kind of interesting that you would say, "Hey, we screwed up. Go to one of our competitors."
Editors for a little bit. Well, and I think they know that most people kind of do have multiple solutions. I think, the other thing I do think that it's so interesting to me how all this is transpiring because, there's such a delicate balance between, overregulation and protections. And I think
Right.
to me, it's always a question of timing where it's like, are these platforms far enough along? And again, with Zelle, I mean, it's like, $500 billion is pretty far along.
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
definitely don't want to stifle the innovation, and so you want to, give these platforms an opportunity to scale up and kind of take the handcuffs off. But then at some point, when do you kind of jump in and say, okay, like now we got to think more about what is the effect on society, what's the effect on on consumers, and so it's always about it's interesting because crypto's in the same spot. I feel like crypto payments and Zelle and these P2P, it's like at what point do you say, okay, we need to put because you put those regulations in place, there are other countries who are not going to regulate things as heavily, and so
So we just move.
right, and so they're going to have more innovation is going to continue there because the business is not tied down with regulatory compliance and all that. But at the same time, so it's a balance. I think it's interesting to see how different administrations handle these things, and I think in some ways, I think our two-party system is good in this way that I feel like we kind of end up swinging pretty far in one direction, then we'll kind of swing back in the other direction. And I think over the long haul, I think it has worked pretty well for
We
the
get
for the
kind
US.
of someplace in the middle, you
Yeah.
know.
Well, it's
Yeah,
funny. It's never in the middle, right? It's always like it swings this way and then it swings the other way. So the net effect over 20 years is it's in the middle, but it's actually
right.
swinging back and forth with it. You know what I mean? Well, so Patty, I think is there one more still today?
One more, and this is just a real brief one, but I kind of saw this coming, just not who or when.
Okay.
HSBC has launched a new financing tool that U.S. clients can use to pay for import duties.
Oh, of course. Yeah. Okay.
Right? Trade pay for import is what they're calling it.
Okay.
And they say it simplifies the payment of import duties.
Okay.
You can pay the duties directly either through pre-agreed credit terms with brokers or direct ACH credits.
Okay.
I
Yeah.
thought that was really interesting. It's an attempt to, HSBC's attempt to ease import duties for clients, comes at a point when most Americans are bracing for higher prices on a
Sure.
wide range of goods, because of the announced tariff plans. Um,
Yeah,
as
we've
as
seen even in our own industry, just in the last couple of weeks, we've seen multiple companies come out, hardware providers come out and say, "Hey, we have to do a price increase." And so, this I talked to who was I talking to the other day? One of the ISVs that we work with at Full Stack Payments, and
uh-huh,
the issue was we're financing the hardware, so we're doing a deal where we can give the merchant the hardware for free, right, and then we're financing it. Well, I had to obviously to do that, I had to understand the cost of the hardware, right?
right?
I was like, hey, I need you to send me the hardware cost. And he's like, well, I'll send you two. He's like,
right?
the hardware cost on the inventory I have now, and here is the like 60% higher cost that I will have in a month, And I was like, okay. So yeah, it's having an impact on our industry for sure. It's interesting to watch. But the other thing I will say about it that I found super interesting is that if the intention was to kind of decrease the power of China's manufacturing prowess or whatever,
Right.
it is definitely doing that. Like everybody I talk to is saying like, oh yeah, well we're in the process, we're setting up with a company in over in this country or this company
Well,
or,
India is a big one,
yeah,
right? Yeah.
India's the big winner in all of this, and others. South Korea, there, is a company, and so a lot of the hardware companies are like, they're like, well, now we're going to source in all these different countries. So I think that when the dust clears with this, even though people will, of course, go back to using, Chinese manufacturing, ultimately the net result is going to be that they're going to have multiple vendors, though, not just.
Exactly.
So
Exactly. And I think that's
China was getting, let's say, 100% of, let's say, a certain, terminal manufacturing, they're now going to get 30% because the companies realize, hold on, we have to diversify.
and that really, that diversification makes for much better um, security for the
Better
system.
security, better competition, lower cost overall. Like so I'm very curious to see how it's all gonna, shake out. I'm still very hopeful that within 6 months it'll all kind of settle, but I think
Yeah.
that, but yeah, I think the net result of it long term, I think is going to be interesting and potentially good to in the market. So
Yeah, and I think this HSBC thing is just the first in a string of initiatives that we're going to see coming out.
yeah, sure, yeah. Well, Patty, always a pleasure. Thank you so much for all the research you do to keep us up to date on the industry for today in payments.
Oh, thank you, James. I really appreciate doing it with you. I have a lot. It's a lot of fun.
Yep. Well, we appreciate you, Patty. Thank you.